Hello everyone, I'm Keith Plattfoot with Kviation, and today we're going to look at printing your logbook in Smart Logbook. Now, although you'll be logging your flights in Smart Logbook on your phone or your tablet, you can also create a professional looking printed version of your logbook anytime that you need that. So let's take a look at a typical printout and some of its features. Now this is the Jeppesen Basic format, which is of course modeled after the paper logbook made by Jeppesen. You'll see that this is a two-page format. This is designed to be bound into, for example, a three-ring binder or maybe into a book, and so each logbook page has both a left and a right side here. There's some room on the inside for binding that or maybe punching some holes, and I'll show you later in the video how to configure this when you're printing. Now, all of the logbook formats in Smart Logbook typically have a common set of columns, and so you'll always have a date, some columns for aircraft, your flight route, various durations, and a remarks column. You'll also at the bottom have per page and overall running totals. You can optionally add things like page numbers, and it also supports printing signatures, either your own signature on each page that you print, or per flight instructor signatures. So let's look at all the different formats that Smart Logbook supports. So this first one, again, is the Jeppesen Basic. This is great for student pilots and really a lot of GA pilots. So this one includes an extra wide remarks column, and it also has instrument approaches and holds. So if you hold an instrument rating, you can easily print that. The Jeppesen Pro format is very similar to the Jeppesen Basic. It includes all the same columns and adds a few new ones. So this one also has the night takeoff and landings columns. It also adds the approach type column, as well as the second in command column here. If you're a Canadian pilot, Smart Logbook supports two different Transport Canada formats. Both of these formats are going to have columns for the crew members, and all of the duration columns here, for example, your PIC and your dual time, these are all going to be grouped under both single engine or multi-engine, and further grouped under day or night. Now, if you need to log second in command time for a single engine aircraft, we've got a special version of the Transport Canada logbook specifically with those columns as well. Now for European pilots, we have the EASA format. This format includes departure and arrival time columns. It also gives us columns to show us single versus multi-pilot time. And over here on page 2, we have a dedicated group of columns for simulator sessions. Moving on, the DGCA India format is modeled after the standard logbook used in that country. We have columns here for the PIC under supervision time. And otherwise, it actually is very similar to the Transport Canada format in that a lot of these columns here are grouped under single versus multi-engine, for example. Moving on to the last printed format here, this is the FAA 8710-1 format. Now this is not a traditional logbook format per se, it's actually a summary report that you could use for filling out the IACRA application. So this one's going to show your overall time per aircraft category, and it has a number of different columns here for tracking various time that the FAA looks at. You can see that there's a number of different cross-country columns here, and we're going to talk a little bit later in the video about this particular feature because Smart Logbook typically can infer this value automatically from the flight, can determine which flights of yours are cross-country. The exception to this is if your flights included an airport without a known location. So we'll take a look later how to solve that problem if it applies to you. And lastly, I want to look at this endorsements page. This is an add-on to all of the regular printed logbook formats. Now this would come after all of your flights if you print your logbook. And these are actually going to come from the certificates that you log within Smart Logbook. Any of these endorsements here. This final page here will print these out in sort of a standard block format, and will include this digital signature of the endorsement itself. So to actually print within Smart Logbook, you're going to go here to the More tab and go to Printing and Reports. And you can see here all the formats that we talked about, the different categories and countries. So let's go ahead and go into one of these here. You can see the different FAA formats. And if we go in here to Jeppesen Basic, now we are presented with a number of different options. Let's run through these now. So starting at the top here, we can choose from two different page sizes. The app supports both US standard letter pages, as well as a more common international standard, which is the A4 page. The next option is how many rows we want on our logbook. We have two kind of built-in options here. We have both normal and dense, which will print either 15 or 24 flights per page. And additionally, we can also choose any number we want between 8 and 24. And basically the app will always start a new page after that number of rows. Now, this can be useful if, for example, you're converting from a paper logbook and you want to cross-check your totals, per page totals in the app with your original totals in your paper logbook. You can set this to whatever your paper logbook happens to use. The next option here is to include a title page. So here's an example of the title page that we could print out from Smart Logbook. And this will, of course, come first when we print and can include any information we like here in the additional info field. Next up, we have those endorsements, which I showed you. Now, by default, Smart Logbook will print a page with any signed endorsements. But if you like, you can also print unsigned endorsements and basically just sign them on paper after printing. And for that, you would choose the included option here at the top. So next option here is print for binding. So if we go in here, we can see this is either a yes or no option. And this is what we want to choose. We're going to want to choose yes if we do in fact want to print and actually bind our logbook into a 3-ring binder or into a book. Now if we do this, we also want to enable double-sided or duplex printing in our operating system. So pretty much whatever computer you're printing this on, if it's a Mac or it's a Windows machine, they all have an option to, if your printer supports it, to print on both sides. If we want to do this, you'll also want to make sure that you enable the flip on short edge option. And you can see a couple of examples here. Here's that option if we're printing from a Mac. If you're printing from Chrome, you can find that option here. If you're on a Windows machine, either printing from the Edge browser, this is where that option is. Or if you're printing from the default Windows print dialog, you can find the equivalent option here. Now, you may note that iOS does have built-in support for printing directly from your phone or tablet. And even though there is an option for double-sided printing, it doesn't seem possible to flip on the short edge. It always seems to use the long edge, which is not going to print the logbook in the way that you need it to. So essentially, you're going to want to probably save the PDF from your phone, send it to a computer, and print it from there, if at all possible. Now again, this is only necessary if you actually want to bind your logbook this way. If you're okay with single-sided printing, you can just print directly from the phone and you don't have to choose any options when actually printing. The next option here is pretty self-explanatory. This will add page numbers to your printed logbook. And the last one here is the pilot's signature, which allows you to print your own signature at the bottom of each page of your logbook as a certification that those totals are correct. Moving down, we have some additional options for which flights we print. We can choose here the range of dates that we want our logbook to cover. And the next one down lets us include any prior totals in our logbook. Now these could include carry-forward entries that you've logged within the app. It could also include flights prior to the beginning of the date range that we've set, if we've enabled that option. And so any totals in flights prior to the beginning of our date range are going to end up on that first page when we print in the carry-forward totals row. And that way they're added to the overall and running totals when we print. The next option down here is filter. Now this will let us filter our flights by any of the supported filters. So we can easily choose any kind of subset of our flights and only print those entries. And lastly here we have the infer durations option. Now generally this one, you're going to want to keep this on. This is especially important for those columns which are grouped. We saw a couple of formats, for example, the Transport Canada or the DGCA format, where the PIC time or the dual time is going to be classified as either single engine or multi-engine or day versus night. Now this is how this works by default. Smart Logbook is able to infer these durations even if you don't log them that specifically. So if I log a flight in a single engine aircraft and I log some PIC time, Smart Logbook is going to be able to infer that was PIC either day or night, and whether that was single engine versus multi-engine. It's only going to do that inference if this option is turned on. Now, if I turn this option off, I could still log time using, as it says here in the instructions, using a combination duration field, where I specifically say, this is PIC daytime, this is PIC nighttime, and so on. But it's typically easier to keep this option on and let the app figure it out for itself. Now, when you're ready to print, we're going to tap Print in the upper right-hand corner. This is going to show us a nice preview of our printout. We can scroll this and zoom into this. And when we're ready to actually print this, you're typically going to choose the share option here at the bottom and send it to, maybe email it to yourself. You're going to see all the typical options here for, maybe uploading this to iCloud, sending this via email, or even airdropping it to another Mac. We also have, at the top here, we also have options to save it as a file or print directly from our phone. Okay, so what if you print your logbook and it didn't turn out the way you expected? So let's go through a couple of troubleshooting steps here. So the most common issue that we see is that some of those columns in a printed logbook are empty when they should be populated. Many of the logbook formats include columns for aircraft related time. So it could be aircraft category and class. In the Jeppesen Basic and Pro formats, it might be single engine versus multi-engine on the EASA. It could be the multi-pilot column, or it could even be the number of engines column on the DGCA format. Now, in all these cases, this information is going to come from the aircraft models. And so basically, if you fill out your aircraft models correctly, the app should be able to print those formats and those columns as you expect. So to check this, we're going to go back to the More tab and open up our models. And essentially, we need to check each model here and make sure that the relevant properties are set like we expect. So as I said, it could be category class here, it could be the multi-pilot option, or it could be the multi-engine option. As long as all of those are set, we should see those corresponding columns populated correctly. Another problem you might run into is if your crew members are empty. And if that's the case, you need to check your flights and basically make sure that your crew members are in fact added to your flights here. Now this includes yourself. If there's a column in the logbook for example, first officer, and it's not being populated. Just make sure that you have all the crew members set there. You may also run into an issue with your sim sessions not being printed. The support for simulators kind of varies depending on the different formats. And so if you run into this problem, I would recommend taking a look at another video I recorded, which is specifically covering logging sim time. So take a look there for some specific troubleshooting steps. Additionally, if you have logged some carry forward entries in your logbook, and those are not showing up in your prior totals column on the first page, I've also recorded another video specifically for carry forward time. And this is especially relevant if you print a Transport Canada logbook, which has some cross-country columns, which can be a little bit tricky to set up correctly, but I do go through that step by step in the linked video here. And lastly, if you're printing the FAA 8710-1 report, as I said, this one does categorize all of your time by aircraft category. So if you see one of these categories missing, you're going to have to go back and update your models as I've already showed, and you'll actually see an error if this is the case. So it will tell you if it detects any flights in aircraft which don't have a category set. Lastly, the 8710 report does also have a number of cross-country columns, and as I alluded to earlier, usually Smart Logbook can figure this out automatically. It knows based on the aircraft that you flew that flight in what the FAA requirements are as far as distance to qualify as a cross-country flight. Now, the only time it can't do this is if it doesn't know where those airports are. So if you've flown to an airport that's not in the app's built-in database, you can fix this one of two ways. You can either add a custom airport record so it does know where the airport is, and this is probably the preferable way to do this. To do this, you can go back to the More tab, you can open up the airport screen, and simply tap the plus here at the top, and then enter all of the relevant information for that airport, including its latitude and longitude here. The other option is, if you like, you can also choose to log a special duration, which is the cross-country 87-1 time. And this is a way to specifically say, no, this does qualify as cross-country time. This field is not turned on by default, but if you go into settings here and go under durations, we can actually turn this field on by tapping the edit button, and you'll see here we can now add this time to our flights and tell the app specifically which time does or doesn't qualify. So just go ahead and log this alongside your existing cross-country time, and that should fix it. But that's about it for printing in Smart Logbook. If you have any questions or run into any problems that aren't addressed in this video, feel free to shoot us an email at feedback@thesmartlogbook.com, and we'll be happy to help you out. Thanks.